Well, yes, Scherete. I'm the Roman Orthodox, but you can call me Roman or Magister Romanus. Either way, it's up to you. And tonight we've got a live stream. We're going to be talking about the Divine Liturgy tonight, going for your first time and for your 100th time. So this live stream is sort of inspired by the fact that I've been Orthodox now for about 2.5 years. And in that time, I guess you could say I've gone to the Divine Liturgy at least 100 times, but probably more. And so we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to get started here in just a few seconds. So welcome in those of you that are watching, and we'll get started with our topic here in just a few minutes. Let me get set up on the other channel so that this is so that other people can join in. And if you have any thoughts about attending Divine Liturgy for the first time or for the 100th time, please be sure to put those comments in the chat box, and I'll be sure to talk about that. All right, let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Welcome in. We're about to get started. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started, even though we're a little bit late. So we are discussing tonight the Divine Liturgy, going for your first time and going for your 100th time. And as we wait for a few more people to be joining us, I'd like to start off by talking about some of the resources that you can get to sort of learn more about the Divine Liturgy. The first is to get a very good prayer book, such as the Molitovnik, if you are from the Slavic tradition or from the Russian Orthodox tradition. The Molitovnik is a great resource because it has the propers and it has the text of the Divine Liturgy in it. So it's a good choice as far as having something to follow along in the liturgy and really dig into the text behind the liturgy. Another resource that you might use is the Pocket Prayer Book from the Antiochian Archdiocese. This has the sort of the people's part, the out loud portions of the Antiochian Divine Liturgy. But if you want to dig even deeper into the Divine Liturgy, A great resource is the Liturgicon, which I also Liturgicon. This is a book that I use quite a bit, not only as a resource for learning about the Divine Liturgy, but also as a prayer book, because it has the hours and it has the various services in it. So it makes an excellent prayer book as well. If you're coming in, be sure and post those comments, post those questions in the chat box. Especially tell me, what was it like going to the Divine Liturgy for the first time for you? What was it like going to Divine Liturgy for the first time for you? Let me know about those thoughts and sort of what you're thinking in those comments as we go. Okay, so let's get started. Going to Divine Liturgy for the first time. The first thing I want to say about it was that I spent a good deal of the Divine Liturgy being fairly confused about the structure. So I had read the text, I had some sort of notion, but until you see it live in person, it is a bit difficult to follow along with. That being said, I was not the biggest fan of Divine Liturgy. I came from the traditional Latin Mass background, which, as many of you would know, the traditional Latin Mass is something that is very quiet. It's very concentrated. It's somber. It's slow, etc. And when I first attended the Divine Liturgy, I found the sort of rapid rate of the chants to be kind of distracting. In fact, fairly off-putting. And so it took me a while to sort of settle into making the Divine Liturgy the way that I went to church. I did love it. I love the incense. I love the ritual of it and all of that and the mystery that is behind it. But to be honest, the first time I attended Divine Liturgy, it was not my favorite experience. Over time, I think I really got to where I understood the structure of the Divine Liturgy. And while that takes away from some of the mystery of the thing, because you find out they really are following rules and they really do have a script, and there are actual reasons why they're doing things. It's not just all mysterious and doing things up at the altar, with no rhyme nor reason. It's also, it has this structure, and understanding the structure can help you sort of get into I think the spirit of the worship and understanding what it is that the church is trying to convey as you understand the liturgy. So I will say that going from the first time to the 100th time in attending Divine Liturgy, really digging into that structure of the Divine Liturgy was really helpful. And again, if you're coming in, be sure to put those comments, put those questions that you have about the Divine Liturgy, or put your own comments in the chat, and I'll be responding to those as we go. So, talking about the Divine Liturgy. Once again, when I first attended, I found that it was mysterious, but not necessarily in a pleasant way, right? It was mysterious in that I didn't know what was coming next. And now I sort of do know what's coming next. I do have a better understanding of the text of the liturgy, but I find it more difficult to get into the mystery of the Divine Liturgy, right? Having now spent some time studying my Liturgicon, right? Trying to figure out all the rubrics and understand the outline of the liturgy as a good Western man might do. It does sometimes feel difficult to enter into the mystery, and I think with that, in this case, experience is not necessarily the best teacher, but in terms of focusing on the Divine Liturgy and getting into that, we might say, that spirit of worship, that concentration of worship, the process becomes much more natural if you sort of focus on the text. And that was something that I was talking with a fellow convert today, that different from when I first attended and I was looking at all the stuff, right? What are they doing next? Oh, look, there's someone with incense. Oh, look, there's icons, right? Instead of focusing on that, now my focus tends to be on the texts of the Divine Liturgy. And that's really where I think the wisdom of a book like the Molitovnik, like the Jordanville Prayer Book, even like the Erie old ritualist prayer book, that have a lot of the liturgical texts. That's where they really shine, is that as you attend more and more, your ability to focus on the text and really absorb what they're trying to teach you about God and about the saints and so forth, is enhanced. That's at least my experience. Attending Divine Liturgy for the first time was not for me an explosive experience like I know it is for some converts, because I did come from a liturgical tradition. I came from a Catholic tradition. I came from the traditional Catholic tradition, in which mystery and awe and reverence and all of those sorts of things were quite there. What you don't quite get used to in the Eastern Orthodox practice is I hate to say casualness of it, but I would say the speed at which the rituals are performed. The fact that there's a lot of motion around the altar that isn't strictly regimented, right? If you come from a traditionalist Catholic background, you're used to altar servers knowing exactly where to stand and what to say. But nonetheless, despite it not being regimented, with it not being regimented and having a more casual atmosphere, I found it initially very difficult to concentrate. I actually found it upsetting. So, true story, like after attending Divine Liturgy for the first few times, I actually felt kind of nauseous. Not from, the nature of the liturgy or anything like that, but it seemed to me that I was losing forever that sense of concentration and quiet, the smoothness of Gregorian chant and all of those sorts of things, and going into something that's much more abrasive. I don't feel that way now, because Divine Liturgy feels much more like something that's natural, something that we all go to church and we worship in this particular way. It doesn't feel quite as frenetic as it used to be. But I will say, people do move around a lot more in an Orthodox church than pretty much any other church that I know of. And so when I came in, it was really a shock to the system. In fact, a disturbing shock to the system, to see that in Divine Liturgy. And I do know that there are churches that are a little less, shall we say, in motion, a little less casual about moving around and lighting icons during the liturgy. But at least that was my initial experience. And I got much more used to it as I went along. I have increasingly thought of Divine Liturgy and attending Divine Liturgy, attending Orthros, all of that. If you imagine it as a fire, like a fireplace, and the warmth is all around, no matter where you are in the church, right? And you eventually, just like being around a campfire or being around a bonfire, you have to get used to being around the warmth and moving around and getting what you need and then going back to the fire. But whenever you're really focused on worshiping, it's like the three youths. You step into the fire, right? You step in, and maybe you have to step out to do something, right? But then you step back in, and that's okay, because it takes intense concentration to be focused on the mystery of these wonderful words that make up our Divine Liturgy. And there can be various ways to help you step into the fire. One can be having a book to follow along with the texts. For some people, that's a really good way to do it, right? To kind of keep your head on the Psalms. The other can be to close your eyes. St. Matrona suggested, standing in front of an icon or closing your eyes, not that she had to, but, and really focusing on the prayer at hand, looking at an icon throughout the liturgy. All of these things are sort of things that I have discovered over time to help me step into the fire of the divine liturgy and focus on what's going on. The more that I'm sort of just distracted by the music, or unfortunately, as a musician, distracted by listening to what the musical choices were, and seeing when someone is off key or on key or what have you. But the more that I just sort of step into the fire and let myself sort of be carried away with the worship, the better off I am. I think maybe this suffers a lot in churches, particularly convert-heavy churches, that are so focused on doing the right thing, right? Having a very regimented liturgy, having so much of the liturgy be coming from books or hymnals or that sort of thing, rather than people having the liturgy memorized and it being a much more natural experience. So anyway, that's my experience. There are some churches that almost treat a divine liturgy as if it were a Methodist worship service, unfortunately. And I find that it's a lot more helpful if things flow more naturally. But anyway, that's just my experience attending different churches. But in terms of the divine liturgy from the first time to the 100th time, I definitely have found that you have to make a concentrated effort to step into the worship. It can't be something that you just go to and watch once you've gone several times, right? Another thing I was thinking about this afternoon, as I was sort of contemplating what our topic for tonight would be, I was thinking about how the different parts of the liturgy correspond to other rites. In other words, correspond to like Western liturgy or what have you. One thing that strikes me is that both the Western liturgy and the Eastern liturgy have an opening section that used to be a procession, but is now done in the church. So in the Latin Mass, that opening processional part is the introit with the Kyrie, and then kind of moves into the Gloria, right, as you approach the altar. And this actually takes place in procession, if it's done correctly. But of course, there are prayers, but it all takes place in the church, right? And usually on Sunday it follows the asperges, the sprinkling with holy water. So you have this introit, and the introit is usually themed on the saint or feast of the day. In the East, we have 3 antiphons that, or psalms, depending on the tradition. And those 3 antiphons or psalms actually have a similar function to the introit, in that they are the former processional hymns that have now been moved into the context of the divine liturgy. And the third one actually does involve a procession, the sort of small entrance, the little entrance. And it struck me like, what is the function of this procession, right? Why is it moved into the church, even though we're no longer processing from one church or the stational church into the main church? What is the function of this procession? And it is, it struck me that this likely was a way, or is a very good way, to psychologically go from everyday ordinary life to transition into the world of the liturgy, right? To move from what is ordinary, from our everyday life, into the liturgical action that we're attending. I don't know if there are any writers on that. I haven't seen that, but it seems to me that there's this transition now in the West, right? It goes straight into that transition with the introit hymn, and psalm and so forth, and so you just get one big step into the liturgy. And with the Eastern liturgy, you go in stages, right? It's understood you're not just going to sweep into the liturgy. It's going to take three. And I particularly like whenever it's the antiphons, right? You start with the Theotokos as the door into the liturgy, and then you go to Christ, right, our mediator, and then finally you're in the Troparion of the day, right? The Apologetikion of the day, or the Beatitudes, which sort of gets you into the mystery of the gospel or the feast that you're celebrating. So anyway, I was just thinking about that today, the function of processional to sort of take us out of the normal world and bring us into the world of the liturgy, and how the East just sort of wisely has this notion that it's going to be a slow transition, that it's not all going to happen at once. I don't know. Again, I'm no theologian or a teacher or preacher, but it seems to me like that somehow corresponds better to the Orthodox mentality, that things can be gradual, things can take time to get into that position. And so that's something that I notice the 100th time that I've attended Divine Liturgy, or 100 plus time that I've attended Divine Liturgy. When I first started, it seemed strange that we started off with these 3 different hymns. Now it seems to me, okay, I need these 3 hymns to sort of get me into the main action of the Divine Liturgy. So learning about the structure of Divine Liturgy, it both helps and it hurts, right? It hurts that sense of mystery, that sense that of not knowing, the numinous aspect of Divine Liturgy, but it can help you understand the purpose of things, and so help you follow along. And as I said, as I continue to attend, I do find that I do find that spending more time with the text really helps. Let's see. We've got a comment. Yay. Okay. Mr. Conklin says, coming from a TLM background myself, I enjoyed the Divine Liturgy right away. I liked the use of the vernacular. I hear that a lot from traditionalist Catholics. I actually am not, I don't care if it's vernacular or not, but yeah, it was interesting worshiping normally in the vernacular now, going from Latin. Sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, just quit attacking me with words. Of course, I also knew Latin, so, there's that. The free flowingness, but not in the stupid Novus Ordo, right? Yes. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. I partially agree with you. Use of the vernacular, really interesting experience, especially for having worshipped in Latin for 16 years. But the free flowingness, not in the stupid Novus Ordo way. I want to jump in on what I think the stupid Novus Ordo way is. Okay. And you tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Conklin, Matthew Conklin. What is free flowing about the Novus Ordo Roman Mass? It's the presider, right, doing whatever he wants, and all of us who are attending Mass with ex-priest, Father whoever, Father Patrick, Father, Smith, whatever, we have to do and listen to whatever it is that he comes up with that day, which could be anything. Definitely, heard a little bit of modalism, heard a little bit of Pelagianism, heard a little bit of every heresy you can name when the priest was making up various things to say during, say, penitential rite B, or during the prayer after the intercessions, all of that sort of thing. You're just stuck with one priest and his view on what you ought to hear that morning, right? That is the free flowing, right? The improvisation that's involved in the Novus Ordo Catholic Mass. The traditional Latin Mass, there's no free flowingness, right? It's all fairly regimented. The good thing that is very free is your thoughts, right? You're very free to contemplate and meditate, and I think that's a wonderful thing about the traditional Latin Mass. The Orthodox Church, you've got this time to really contemplate and meditate. There's no doubt that there's that in the Divine Liturgy. But you also don't have a priest just like making stuff up, right? It's the texts themselves that come out and really shine. So tell me if I'm right. Like the free flowingness, yes, you have free flowingness in that you're free to worship in this space, and you're free to go and light candles and venerate icons and that sort of thing. But you're not subject to just the whims of the celebrating priest. Yeah, I think that's a lot better, just personally. Do we have any other thoughts, like attending the Divine Liturgy the first time? I'll jump in and I'll say one mistake I think we have with how we greet visitors in the Orthodox Church. Some Orthodox churches, like, you go in and you can't find a spot to just stand and pray before you're sort of inundated with people handing you, like, oh, here is the order of Divine Liturgy, and here is our handout with the propers for today, and you just follow along here, and then this has got the extra stuff and that sort of thing. And I always think this is a huge mistake. Like, there's something to be said for just letting them be confused for the first time they visit, right? Let them just look and see the beauty of the liturgy and observe it, and maybe just hear the words, experience it not as a play that you can read a script along with, but to actually experience it just as worship. I think texts are actually for when you get used to going to the Divine Liturgy and you want to learn more. That's just my take. Maybe there's a little bit of a different experience, attending Divine Liturgy in a different language, like Slavonic or Greek. You might maybe text. Yeah, I guess with the free flowing of the priest alone, whatever he wants is how it is. Yep. It's definitely how it is with the Novus Ordo. With the Orthodox liturgy, right? Priests can have some preferences in how they celebrate, but you don't just get them making up stuff along the way. That's something. That at least you don't see. I'll tell you some differences in attending Divine Liturgy in how different priests celebrate Divine Liturgy that I've seen. And y'all can tell me if you've had these experiences. So obviously you have the difference between Greek tradition parishes like the Antiochians, the Greeks, etc., and Russian tradition or Slavic tradition parishes like the Serbs, the Russians, and so forth. And there are shades of differences between all of those. So I don't mean to minimize those differences. So you have the initial difference of, like, you might say layout. It's pretty much the same, but the Greeks tend to abbreviate a little bit more than the Slavs, and so you experience those differences as you attend different traditions, liturgies. The main difference I have seen is that some priests say the silent prayers more loudly, right? Some of them will say them aloud, the prayers that are often said silently, while other priests tend to say the prayers in a secret voice, especially at the end of the litanies, if there's no deacon. The anaphora, I've heard it where the anaphora is completely silent, except for those parts that are, traditionally sung, like the words of institution and so forth. And I've heard it where most of the anaphora was said aloud. So, there is some range of discretion on the part of a priest as to what parts he says aloud, what parts he says silently. But, that's essentially the extent of the differences that I've seen, in terms of structure. I've heard that priests often get pushback in Orthodoxy from laity from getting too liberal with it. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I would say that's true. And I would say if a priest is really going off the rails, bishops have no problem fixing liturgical abuses in the Orthodox Church. I think that's one benefit of having bishops be monks, right? And having them be kind of separated from a lot of the clergy, is that they have a more, shall we say, elevated experience. I don't know if that's true or not. Anyway, just an offhand thought. Seems to me like Orthodox bishops are perfectly willing to police the liturgy as well. And that is particularly going on in some archdioceses, that bishops are trying to sort of fix the liturgical problems that have come up. Let's see. I think we're going to end this in about 2 minutes. Any other thoughts from anyone? Maybe, maybe not. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I actually just attended a hierarchical liturgy with Archbishop Peter Rocor. I was in awe. I remember the bishop. I remember the bishop mass, the pontifical mass, was simply the Novus Ordo, but with the bishop instead of the priest. Yeah, hierarchical divine liturgies are great in the Orthodox Church. I'm trying to think if I've seen one. I've never actually attended a hierarchical divine liturgy. I always seem to be out of town when they're having one at our parish or at another parish. So, but yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful. In the Novus Ordo, yeah, one of the things that they did was take most of the pontifical ceremonies and just make them the normal Novus Ordo Mass, such as the priest being seated over at the chair and presiding from the chair. That's an Episcopal thing, not a Novus. Traditionally, the priest would preside from the altar, whereas the bishop would preside from the chair. In fact, that's pretty common in between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, prior to Catholicism deciding to prior to them deciding just to change everything. Really enjoy your channel and plan to say more in the future. I am a priest and can speak to many things you mentioned. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for dropping by. Um, I and I appreciate that priests have dropped by the channel and appreciate it. I actually I spoke with a priest with my wife's former pastor before she moved, and he has watched a few videos on my channel, and he said I'm really glad you're sort of going on there and talking about just living an ordinary Orthodox life, right? And that has been the focus of this channel. My focus is on, yes, I have a perspective as a former traditionalist Catholic, and I've got things, to add to the experience as far as that goes. But number one, I just want to share that you don't have to be a theology nerd to be a good Orthodox Christian, right? Although you don't have to, um, that cradle Orthodox have a lot to teach us in heading into in learning about the faith and learning to assimilate the faith. I think that once again, there's just a lot that you can gain along the way just by being an ordinary Orthodox person, and it doesn't take joining a Discord server, right? It doesn't take all of those sorts of things to be a good Orthodox Christian. Anyway, so hopefully I'm at least spreading that message somewhat and encouraging people to go to their priests, go to their local parishes, visit with people who have been Orthodox a long time, ideally they and their parents and their grandparents and all of that. I'm a cradle Orthodox priest born in Canada, a rare breed. That is indeed a rare breed. But we have a lot that we can learn. I think. I don't know. I was telling my wife the other day. So y'all don't throw stones at me right now. But I said, when I was traditionalist Catholic, I think if I had moved to Italy, it would have been a whole lot harder to convince me to convert to Orthodoxy. If I had been in a culture that was, sort of cradle Catholic and sort of smooth things out, right? That saw how to incorporate faith into life, and it was a much more natural family centered process. I think that would have been a difficult switch. I'm not saying that God wouldn't have brought me into his holy church. I'm not saying that everything is relative to your experiences or anything like that. But I think that ultimately it would have been a lot more difficult. As it is, I got lucky. I came into the church and then I met my wife, who is cradle Orthodox and comes from a cradle Orthodox family. And it really helped me gear in and focus on and develop my commitment to the Orthodox faith. So I'm not saying that has to be everybody, but it certainly helped me as I am intellectually curious on everything, and so I'm always tempted to go looking for the neat and the weird and to wander around and look for different ideas. But having someone to say, okay, that's all very well, now help me make the koleva for tonight, or that's all very, very well and good. Anyway, we're going to go decorate the beer for Pascha, right? Oh, yes. That's what's important. That's what's going to bring me right back to Christ and back to his church each time. So I think that it's a really helpful thing. Okay. Wow. What great conversation. Thank you, Father, and thank you, Matthew, for joining in the conversation. Um, I'm not sure that I'm going to keep this live stream up on the channel as a recording, just because it was more sort of off the cuff, and I just really wanted to open up the discussion. So, but I really did appreciate your you guys' contributions, and we'll try to do some more live streams. I intend to have a video out later this week. I'm actually off from work, so thanks be to God, I actually can work on putting together a video. And I'd be really interested in topics that you think I should cover that I haven't covered already. Or maybe if I did cover one early on and you think I ought to go over it again, then please let me know in the comments on the community page. Let me send me an email. I have an email for this channel. Also, I would mention I'm doing short form reviews of prayer books over on TikTok. So if you just look up my name on TikTok, the Roman Orthodox, and I'm doing like little quick reviews of each of the prayer books that I have in my library. My book budget doesn't allow me to expand greatly. However, you all can help that by joining the Patreon. So, think about that. So yeah, you can join me over on TikTok and see some short form reviews if you'd like. All right. Well, with that, I will say adiosas, kalispera. Have a very good evening. Thank you, Father.